Oh, I would like to say while I'm here, we have Evan up front who's going to be spinning yarn as we spin our yarns. And each of the storytellers are going to get, what are we going to get, Evan?
Well, you all picked your color.
Got the color. What's the product?
Well, the final product is going to be yarn. It's going to be sparkly purple,
That's
your
mine.
choice, cosmic green,
Cosmic.
natural gray, and then for the final storyteller, I'm going to roll them all together, because one at a time they're thread, but together they're yarn. And if someone wants to take home a cosmic green, purple, and gray ball of yarn that's one of a kind, it'll be your souvenir.
All right. So put it there. Dip in. While we're waiting for straight up 2 o'clock, I'd like to recognize a few people in the house. We have Sarah Armstrong, the chairperson of the Storytellers Association of California. Thanks for coming on out. And also, and I'm also a member of the board, and so is Brandon Spars, and so is Clara. Still, so we are well represented here, and we would like for all of you to go to the website and to join the Storytellers Association of California. Lots of good information, a great website, and a great newsletter.
Great storytelling festival.
Storytelling Festival, Bay Area Storytelling Festival, and a lot of local swaps. So you can find out about a lot of other local Bay Area storytelling associations. And then also in the back is someone I have the opportunity to serve on the board with. Well, he's actually the director of the Prescott Circus Theater, David Hunt. You don't know anything about Prescott Circus Theater. It's a great theater providing kids in West Oakland with circus skills. And we have some information in the back, and he is currently talking to Ira about maybe doing something here at the Monkey House. Okay. Oh, yes. And if you have not already signed the sign-in sheet, so you'll know when our next event is coming up. Our next one is in September. And we'll get that information out to you. And at the end of our storytelling, we're going to have a 5-minute open mic. So you need to be thinking about what story you want to tell related to Game On. So a few housekeeping, bathrooms in the back. Try to go to the bathroom in between tellers and don't slam the door. Go in and come in. Please silence your phones. And when the storytellers are finished, we're going to bring them back up and they'll tell you a little something about what they have going on. So, the game is on. Woo!
Yeah.
How many of you remember where you were when John F. Kennedy was killed? Show of hands. How many of you were not born when John F. Kennedy was killed? How many of you know who John F. Kennedy was? Okay, good. Well, I got a call from my son the day that was an attempt on Trump's life. Brandon and I had just finished a wonderful storytelling session for the Free Folk Festival in Golden Gate Park, and I was on a high. It was a beautiful storytelling event. And my son calls me from Taiwan, that's where he lives. And first thing I do is I say, oh man, I had the storytelling, experience of my life, and I was in Golden Gate Park, and it was just so cool. He said, wait a minute, Dad, time out. He said, you obviously have not heard the news. I said, what is it now? He said, you didn't hear about Trump? I said, oh, what the hell has he done this time? He said, that was an attempt on his life, and he was hit. I said, what? And I said, let me get home. I'm driving, I'm on the bridge. I got home, talked to him, and he wanted to know what I thought. And this story came out of it. I said, of all the assassinations I've experienced in my 81 years, JFK is the one that stands out. When MLK was killed, when Robert Kennedy was killed, when Martin Luther King was assassinated and killed, when there were attempts on Reagan's life, Jerry Ford, George Wallace, all of those assassinations, they were traumatizing. But JFK was the one that still plays in my mind. November 22nd, 1963. I was 20 years old, and I was a senior at San Jose State. I was a member of the championship cross-country team. And we were slated to go back to Michigan State and defend our title because we'd won the title in 1962. And when the assassination took place, the president of the campus said, all activities are shut down. No classes, no extracurricular activities, no sports activities. Football, baseball, basketball, cross country. And we had trained all year to defend our title. We didn't even go home that summer because the championship was being held in November. And so we toiled all that. And we heard that news and we were devastated. You know, out of all due respect for JFK, you know, we were going to mourn him in our own way, but we wanted to win. And our coach got the word that the NCAA, that's the National Collegiate Athletic Association, overall body for sports, they said, game on. We're going to hold the championship. And you guys need to come back because you are the defending champs. And Oregon's going to be there, and Ohio State's going to be there, and they're the runners-up. If you don't come, it's going to look bad for you guys. So my coach was a very persuasive guy. You know, he dabbled in psychology. And so, and you know, 80% of athletic performance is psych. Always getting your guys psyched up. And so he went to the president and the athletic director, and he ran it down. He says, hey, we're defending champs. You know, Oregon's coming, Ohio's going to come, we're going to forfeit. You know, all due respect, we understand, but you've got to grant us a waiver. And how do you figure it? He did. We were free to go. And so we were scheduled to run on November 26th in East Lansing, Michigan, Michigan State. I only had one problem. All my teammates, their parents said, go with our blessings. But my mom, she said, oh no, you're not going anywhere. He said, the wheels have come off the country. They say, Russia. I know Russia had JFK killed, that damn Khrushchev. And you have to remember, folks, in '62, that was the missile crisis. And so we were on a war footing. It was a Cold War. And my mama said, I want all my children right here with me in San Francisco. Come on home right now, boy. I said, whoa, mama, all my teammates are going. I don't give a damn about that. You come on home. And then I pulled one out of my hand. I said, mama, you know I'm on scholarship, right? Yeah. I said, you know, you and daddy ain't paying a dime for my education, right? Yeah. I said, it's my job. If I don't run, I'm not doing my job. And she softened because she and my dad have strong work ethics. I said, Mama, you know you want me to show up for work, don't you? She said, yeah. She said, all right, boy, you can go. You can go. But she had a brother and two sisters that lived in Detroit. She said, I'm going to call Sammy right now, and I want her to go up wherever that Lansing, Michigan is. I don't care how far it is from Detroit. And come up there the day of the race, and I want her to pray over your team. Pray that y'all, first of all, y'all win. Don't go back there to lose. You win. And number two, safe passage back home. I said, that's cool. That's cool. And so we took off on the 24th of November. We fly in to East Lansing. We check into the college guest house, put down our luggage, and as we do for every meet, we walk and jog the course. We want to see what the course looks like. And this was a beautiful rolling hill golf course. Hill and dale and loop-de-loop around sand traps and the whole bit. And so the coach is telling us, okay guys, this is going to be a tight shoot here. So you got to be real careful and watch your footing, make sure nobody knocks you down on steps on your hill. And just hold you on, and then it's going to open up. Boom, 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 boom. And he said, this is the halfway mark, this is uphill. I want you to make your move, glide down. So we did all of that. And then we walked back to the guest house. And in the lobby, there was all kinds of commotion. And we're looking and saying, what the hell's going on? Everybody's around the TV set. What happened? What happened? And someone, I'll be damned. Somebody just shot Lee Harvey Oswald. And Lee Harvey, as you know, was a suspected assassin of JFK. And we said, what? And someone came out and said, yeah, this guy Jack Ruby came in there and in the basement of the Dallas police station just shot him point blank. And we were thinking, oh man, what the hell's going on here? You know, the president, and now the suspected assailant, something wrong. And so the coach saw that we were frightened. We thought there is a conspiracy afoot. And can we go out and run this race? Might there be a sniper on the course? He called us to his room, and he used all his psychological skills on us because we were fighting little 20-year-olds. And he said, look, gentlemen, he called us Tagger also. You guys are taggers. You were sent back here to do a job. The president of the university had enough confidence to send you here against all odds. Want you to focus. You have no control over what's going on out there in the world. What you do have control of is this race tomorrow. I want you to get out there and run that race. Run it just like we talked about out there on that golf course a couple of hours ago. Focus, focus, focus. And he said, no TV, no radio, I want you visualizing. And so my coach, Dean Miller, he always talked about team solidarity. He always made sure that we ran together as a pack. He called us the Wolf Pack. He says you always want to run with a runner that is close to your ability. Because in cross country, the lower score wins. And so if you've got 3 guys in the top 10, you're going to win that race. Top 10. If you got 5 in the top 40 or the 1/3 tier, you got a lock on it all together. And so we always ran as a pack. One day somebody would be the alpha male, next day somebody else would be the alpha male. And so we were well matched. And so we went to bed. I'm visualizing my race. All this other stuff is out. I know I got this pressure on me. I've got my relatives coming up from Detroit. My mama said, they coming. It's 91 miles one way, but they coming. And I want you to actually do real good. I said, okay, mama. It's just a little bit more pressure you're adding. That's all right. So we get up the next day. Now my coach was also a little superstitious. He's from Ohio, and he had this Buckeye. You ever see a Buckeye? Yeah, nice little round thing, and he had it polished up. And the way that he got our bonding together before each meet, we would get together, he'd have a pep talk, he'd pass around the Buckeye, and we'd rub it on our nose. And that was shoo. And then he'd say something like, Fishback, I want you to target on Murphy. Tucker, I want you to target on Murphy and Fishback. Boom, boom, boom. And so we get up and we start to do our warm up. And the coach says, "Hey guys, I've got to run back to the guest room real quick. You guys keep warming up." And we said, "Well, what's up? What's up, coach?" He said, "I left the Buckeye." We said, "Oh, coach, you got to get the Buckeye. We can't run without the Buckeye." And so he runs back, gets the Buckeye, and just about that time, the clerk of the court said, "Everybody lines up." Coach is nowhere in sight. And we're kind of jinxed now. I mean, we got used to the Buckeye. But he runs up, gives us the Buckeye. We rub our nose in the Buckeye. We're feeling good, you know. Even in 30-degree weather, we're feeling good. We're ready to go. And so the gun takes off. Bam! And there were over 500 runners in this race. Over 50 schools. And all these different bright colors. And San Jose State, we had gold singlets and white pants. And I'm just looking. And then looks like, damn, that's Ohio State there. And we're just running. And it was a sea of humanity. You've seen starts of the Beta Breaker. They had the marathon this morning. I mean, just goo gobs of people. And so I'm running and I lose contact with my teammates. Nowhere in sight. So I'm running, I'm jostling, trying to get clear of all of this humanity. And then when we get to the half-mile mark, it opens up. Some of the lesser runners start to fall back, and I could see little heads bobbing up and down this golf course. And then, about to the halfway mark, I start to really feel good. I get into the zone. But I still know I've got to find out where I am because I've got to get in the top 10. I know Danny and Jeff are going to be up there. And so finally, with 3/4 of a mile to go, I see them. They're running shoulder to shoulder. And they're like in a pack of 6 runners. And then I count and I'm like 13, quarter mile to go. And so I put it on, pedal to the metal, and I finally get in the top 10. And I wanted to relax. I said, I can put it on cruise control now. Top 10. Kind of tired, but not totally fatigued. And then some guy from Florida State passes me. Bam, I'm back down in the 11th slot. So I've got to surge up, and we go shoulder to shoulder the last 400 meters. But we're passing people also. And I end up getting 8th. My teammate before that got 5th, and the other one got 3rd. Our 4th guy got 40th, and that was the icing on the cake. We did it. We won. It was just an amazing feeling, and we felt so good about it. And so my aunt and uncle were there. They were very happy. We went to a victory dinner, which they picked up the tab, my relatives, for everybody. And we had pictures with the trophy, and my aunt prayed over us again, and special prayer going back, prayed for the nation. And she said, "Boy, you made us proud." I had no idea what this cross-country thing was. She said, "But you could run your ass off." I said, "Thank you, Aunt Sammy." And so we get back to the guest house, and the coach calls us in, and he tells us how proud he is of us. And he says, "Gentlemen, not only have you done something that's unprecedented, you won back-to-back championships in the face of national tragedy. And you know what you got out of it? Not just a trophy, not just a championship, but you got the ability to focus and execute in times of adversity." And that's the lesson I took away from that 1963 event. And so remember, folks, no matter what's happening out here in this wacky world of ours, and it's happening, the race is on, the game is on, and the show will go on. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call up our next storyteller, Mr. Bardon.
Ira confirming videos.
It's all good.
Ben Bardon, you're in the house. There you are.
Let's go, Ben.
Another Ben. Back-to-back Ben. Now Ben is a resident storyteller from the Long Road Society record label. He might tell you a little something about that. Come on up here.
Well, this never gets any easier. I've been telling my dog this story for the last 3 hours. I think she's sick of it. Let's get into it. When I was 7 years old, I went to my first high school football game, and I was enamored with the lights and the crowd and the energy. And I realized then that I wanted to be a high school quarterback. Now the problem was I only weighed 62 pounds, and I know shit about football. But I went out for Pop Warner football, and they let me onto the team, because legally they have to. And they gave me my number, which was 62. And I thought that's how you got your number. I weighed 62 pounds, so they gave me number 62. And that's what I knew about playing ball. But I went out there and I started, and I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. But I kept working, and I kept learning, and I would practice before our team's practice. And I would practice after our team's practice. And eventually, I got to become a Pop Warner quarterback. And my coaches said to me, he said, you know what, you're pretty good at this. And if you keep working and you keep practicing so hard, there's a small chance that you can get into a small college. And so I kept going, I kept practicing, and eventually I became a high school quarterback, starting freshman. And it was a big deal. My whole family came out. And it was the third quarter, and I rolled out right, and I threw a pass to Danny Gerard, and just as I saw him catch it, the lights went out. And when I came to, I saw that my leg was on backwards. I had broken my femur. Now my dad came rushing out to the field, and I was just saying, I just want to play football. I just want to play football. But the look in his eyes says that football was no longer an option. And so I'd lost my path, I'd lost my purpose, and I began to spiral. I got into drugs and alcohol, I caught a couple of felonies, and eventually I became a ward of the court, a ward of the state of California. And I went to one of those places where you don't get out until you're 18. Now on my 18th birthday, I got released, and I was okay with who I was, thanks to the counselors, the staff, the social workers, that people that really cared. They made me feel like I was okay with who I was. But I was so ashamed of who I wasn't. You know, I wasn't a quarterback, I wasn't an athlete, I didn't have a real high school education, I'd never taken SATs. My friends were going to all these exotic places to go to college, like Missoula, Montana, Boulder, Colorado, Sonoma State. But I really wasn't doing anything. You know, I picked up a couple of jobs, I painted a few houses, I served fillets to tourists on the coast. But I was really lost, I was floundering. And it was around this time that my good friend convinced me to go down to Guatemala and visit with this family that he had stayed with for several months. And so I went down there and I met them, and they were coffee pickers and fishermen, and they ran a small tienda. But they were so proud of their work, and they were so happy. They were doing something that I envied. And so I went back to the States. I wanted a job like that, something with purpose, something that I could lean into. And so I went to the local adult day health center, same place my grandfather went before he ended up at the VA. And I said, hey, can I mop your floors and fix your doors? Can I be your maintenance man? And they said, no, we have a maintenance man, but we do need a caregiver. Are you interested in that? Now I said, sure. I didn't know anything about caring for people, how to take care of them or give care to them. I didn't know anything about that. But they let me take the job. And I found out later that the nurses all took bets on me, on how long I would last. And the longest bet was 3 days. But they let me go and they let me take the job, and this place was cool. They had all sorts of activities, like they had bingo. They let me call bingo. And bingo was real serious in this place. And before bingo would start, the folks would take out their hearing aid and put in a new battery, like they were disassembling a weapon before going to war. And then they would check. And if you won bingo, you got a scratcher ticket. And they also let me deal cards. We play poker for Werther's Originals and diabetic butterscotch candies. And I deal off the bottom every time to make sure that somebody different would win. But it wasn't just, bingo and cards. I also had other duties. A lot of people would come there to do stuff that they couldn't do at home, like wash their laundry or take a shower. And, because bathtubs they're treacherous. And everybody's afraid of the fall. And these were war veterans. These were the toughest people you have ever met. But they were so afraid of gravity, because that shit's coming for all of us at some point. But it wasn't just that. I met a lot of cool people there too. I met this guy, Bob, and Bob drove a Rascal. And on the back of the Rascal it had a big flag, and on the front of the Rascal it said Bob's Truck. And he wore Ben Davis workwear and suspenders, which I thought was pretty cool. And I met this woman, Mary. Now Mary hated everybody. I mean, she hated everybody. I tried to get close to her and she said, "Get away from me." But for some reason, every time Mary saw me, she'd start doing this thing. It was really hard to get Mary on and off the bus to come to and from the program. But she took a liking to me for some reason. And so I just say, "Hey Mary, you want to dance?" And we would dance our way onto the bus. And so I got to call bingo, I got to deal cards, and I helped the older men shower. And there was one day I was working with Bob, and I was washing his feet. And he looked down at me and he said, "You know what? You're pretty good at this." And something happened right then. For the first time, I felt like I was in the right place. I felt like I was on the right path. And for the first time since that day on the football field, I felt like I had purpose. I was 18 years ago, and I'm a caregiver to this day. And I'm okay with who I am. And I'm okay with who I'm not. Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Game on. Our next storyteller is Bill Zarski. And Bill is a videographer, he's an author, storyteller. And he's going to tell a story today about the Earthquake World Series.
But first, we're going to sing. Sing along with me, but stop when I say stop. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I never get back. October 17th, 1989. Candlestick Park, San Francisco. The Bay Bridge fell down, man. It's in the drink, man. There was a guy in front of me with a radio. He was relaying news to us. Bay Bridge was in the drink. We were here for a very unique World Series game. It featured our two local teams, the Oakland Athletics against the San Francisco Giants, which had never happened before and has never happened since. But just a few minutes ago, the earth shook and the crowd cheered. It brought up a bunch of questions. Earthquake, how bad was it? Where the hell was my buddy Daryl? And the biggest question of all, who was I going to root for in this World Series? Now, let me back up a bit. I was born in Brooklyn, which meant that by birthright, my team was the Dodgers. And then one day, one very fateful day, those bums of Brooklyn announced that they were moving to California along with the New York Giants, who I didn't know much about, but I was dimly aware they had a player named Willie Mays who was supposed to be pretty good. Now, with the Giants and the A's, with the Giants and the Dodgers gone, New York went from being a 3-team market to a 1-team market. So there was only one team left in town for me to root for, and that was the Yankees, who I'd hated my whole life. Nevertheless, they won a lot of games, and I enjoyed. They quickly became my hometown heroes. I enjoyed rooting for Mantle and Skowron and Yogi, the Mick, Moose, and Yogi Berra. What kid could resist those nicknames? I watched a lot of games on TV, but I never went to a game. I was the only sports fan in my family. My dad made it really clear he had absolutely no interest in attending a baseball game in person. He said, you know, the traffic is so bad, you'd have a really hard time ever getting there on time, if you get there at all. I believed him. I was 10. What did I know? So I watched games on TV. I listened to games on the radio and very quickly realized that I could visualize the game in my head when I listened to it on the radio and how wonderful that was. But I never went to a game. Now, I was a pretty good sports fan up through high school. When I got to college, things changed. I was suddenly not interested in sports at all, not interested in baseball, football, basketball. I was interested in, learning and girls and drugs, college stuff. And that obliviousness to sports lasted through the 70s. I moved out here to go to grad school. Completely missed the fact that the Oakland A's won the World Championship 3 times. Just paid no attention. And I was happy in my life until one day in the early 80s when it all changed. I accepted a freelance job for Channel 2 in Oakland, going into the locker room at Oakland Coliseum and interviewing Billy Martin, who was then the manager of the A's. Now, despite his cantankerous reputation, he was very nice to me and to my producer Nancy, who was blonde and attractive and most of all female. After the interview, Nancy and I went out into the stands. We didn't have a ticket, but the place was about half full, and I had a big professional movie camera on my shoulder. Nobody stopped us, and we sat there very close to the first base line. I could practically reach out and touch the players, and it was fabulous. It was a beautiful day, and suddenly this sport that had seemed so inaccessible for so long was right within reach. It was very exciting for me. Apparently, I looked around at me, there were not a lot of people there, but there were thousands of people nevertheless. Apparently you could go to games after all. They'd all managed to get there. Wait till I tell Pop the exciting news. The next night I took my wife Susan to the game, and we had a great time. And the following year, we celebrated Mother's Day at Candlestick with our infant son. And the year after that, we took my parents to a game in Oakland with our toddler. And we all had a great time. My mom counted balls and strikes. My dad had a great time despite the fact that he still felt like he couldn't really get there. But he didn't have to drive, so he was happy. And besides rooting for Oakland, we lived fairly close to Candlestick at that time, so I was able to slip out and go to Giants games also. So, here's my dirty little secret. For years, I was a bi-coastal baseball fan, rooting for both the Giants and the A's, who played on opposite coasts of San Francisco Bay. See, people jeer at this. I've taken a lot of flack for it. I've been called a bad fan. Apparently, duality in loyalty in sports is not allowed. I've been told you can't root for 2 teams. You have to root for 1 team. But why is this so heinous? My teams, because they were in the same market, one of them was playing at home almost every single day. If one of the teams was on the East Coast, then the game times were staggered. I could watch or listen to 2 games a day. Wasn't I a better fan for watching 2 games a day than just one? Yes, I hear people. one of my son took a lot of flack for this. His friends would say, "How, you can't do this." And a girl in his class said, "It's just too weird, Danny, you just can't do that." And she was a true Blue A's fan because she thought Barry Zito was so hot. So, being bi-coastal isn't always easy. The hardest part is when your teams play each other. The A's and Giants don't play each other. But in the fall of 1989, they were playing each other for the highest stakes there were. They were in the World Series. Who was I going to root for? I was pretty sure I'd root for the A's because I really loved Ricky Henderson and Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco. But I also liked the Giants. They were underdogs at the time. They were down 2-0. Will Clark, Kevin Mitchell, Matt Williams, they were great players, and they were really a lot of fun. So I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I had to bear witness. I knew I wanted to go see the game. So I found a scalper. I paid him way too much money for a couple of tickets. I invited my buddy Daryl. We went off to Candlestick. Daryl immediately left to go, got our seats, and he immediately left to go buy his beers. And while he was gone, the place started to shake like crazy. Now, I was bi-coastal, so I was able to keep my cool. I remember taking Danny to a game that the Giants had hosted where the A's were playing, and he was wearing I decided to root for the home team, and I wore my black and orange Giants regalia. Danny was wearing a Giants t-shirt, a Giants jersey that was open with an A's t-shirt underneath. People gaped and gasped and hooted as we walked by. One person said, "Dude, pick a team." Danny just waved. But these are the hard choices you have to make when you're bi-coastal. So we got to the game. Daryl went off to buy beers. The place suddenly started to shake, and it was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. I looked down at the field and I could see a huge mound of earth moving across, underneath the sod, moving across from left field to center field, like a gigantic rolling pin gone crazy underground. I looked at the stands to my right, and the grandstand was rippling, concrete rippling. I looked up at the wind baffle, and it was flapping around like cardboard. This went on for what felt like 15 minutes. Later they told us the quake lasted 15 seconds. But time really slows down when you're in the middle of something like that. Daryl eventually came back from the beer line, and he said, "Bill," he said, "that was crazy." He said, "I was on the beer line, and it shook like crazy, and then nobody left the beer line." He said, "In fact, during the earthquake, somebody cut ahead of me." He said, and after it was over, everybody cheered, and the same thing happened in the grandstand. Earthquake, stunned silence, and then, "Yay!" And I was thinking, why are they cheering? And I was cheering too, because it was the perfect Northern California greeting for the World Series. I mean, San Francisco's got fog, it's got hills, it's got beautiful views, but it also has earthquakes, and it seemed appropriate. What we didn't know is how bad the earthquake was at that moment. Now, pretty soon, it was clear that there wasn't going to be any game that night. We saw the players coming out onto the field. We saw what we found out later were their families coming out, a lot of young women with babies. And a couple of cop cars came out, and they started to signal us to get out of there using their bullhorns, because we realized that the power was off at the stadium, and what we found out was the power was off almost all across the city. Cop cars came out with their bullhorns going, "Go home! No game tonight! Go home! No game tonight!" So we took a hint, because the sun was going down and there were no lights. Now, we weren't parked very far from the stadium. Daryl and I walked from our seats to my car, and then we drove maybe 2 miles to his place on Potrero Hill. That took us 3 hours. The traffic was so snarled up. No traffic lights, no street lights. And we got there, and I knew I couldn't get home across the Bay Bridge because we were told, in the drink. and I hung out with Daryl and his wife for the rest of that evening. Around midnight, I decided it was time to try and go home. And I decided to drive north through the city to the Golden Gate and then through Marin and back to the East Bay that way. So I headed out in the Potrero district, and it was very weird. Lights were out, unlike the beautiful, bright city I was used to. Everything was dark. It was kind of creepy, like that old movie, Escape from New York. Ever seen that? Snake Plissken walking around. And I drove north on Van Ness Avenue, and here the scene changed. There were lots of cars out. The street lights were out everywhere. The traffic lights were out everywhere. A lot of the intersections were uncontrolled. But in many intersections, there were ordinary citizens standing out in the middle of the road, doing their best imitations of traffic cops. Stop. And in a number of different intersections, people were directing traffic all by themselves, untrained, but just trying to help. And this kind of spontaneous citizen self-mobilization cheered everybody up, and people waved and honked their horns and said hi, and there was something very sweet about it. I got through the city, I got through Marin, I got home, my family was safe. Big sigh of relief. Now, over 60 people died in Northern California during the earthquake, but it turned out that the timing of the World Series game had saved many lives. The quake took place just after 5 o'clock on a weekday during rush hour. Almost forgot. And apparently, when right after the earthquake, Caltrans issued a statement saying that the Cypress structure, there was a double-decker freeway structure in Oakland that collapsed on itself. A mile and a half of this double-decker freeway fell down. And Caltrans said, given the length of the structure and the time of day, there were probably 300, 400, 500 people trapped in there. But as they very carefully dismantled the wreckage over the next few weeks, they found about 42 bodies. And in the rest of Northern California, there were a dozen or two people killed. Of course, every death was a tragedy and very sad, but the original estimates were 500 people to 1,000 had probably died. So in many ways, we felt that things had gotten better. There was not widespread damage, despite the Cypress structure and some other major things like that. I called my parents, and they said it looked on the news as if San Francisco was completely destroyed, which was absolutely not the fact. But there was a lot of emotional damage. In the economic lull that followed the earthquake, because the Bay Bridge was closed and traffic had to be rerouted and a lot of things slowed down, there were many aftershocks. My mood soured. I'd take our dog Sophie to the dog park, and I'd get very worried about whether the only access road in or out would be broken in the aftershocks, and I'd get trapped out there. I really wanted to see the Cypress structure and some of the damage in Oakland, so I put Sophie in the car, and we drove, and it was a really unsuccessful trip. We were unable to get very close to it. We walked around and couldn't really see any of the wreckage. And then Sophie threw up in my car on the way back home. I was not the only one. I was depressed, but I was not the only one. On TV anchors and TV shrinks and doctors were advising everybody, get help, get professional help, or just talk to your friends and neighbors, talk to the people around you, share your experience. It's easier to deal with this if you don't feel like you're the only one who's affected. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll try that. I saw my neighbor out on the street, and I went running out there, and I went running up. I started to tell her all about candlesticks, about the rolling pin and the wind baffle. And she looked at me, and I thought, she thinks I'm crazy. And then she told me about her experience, which was that she'd been home when the earthquake hit. And she went running outside, and that's what you're supposed to do if an earthquake hits in the next 5 minutes. Go outside. And she saw the utility poles on our block swinging back and forth like it's something in a cartoon as the earth rolled and shook around her. I went down to the Burger Depot in our neighborhood and talked to Dave, the owner, as I wolfed down one of his magnificent turkey burgers. And I told him about my experience, and he looked at me and he said that he'd spent 12 hours a day in that shop for the past 30 years, and he'd always felt safe there. And the day of the earthquake, the place shook, and glassware and dishes crashing onto the floor off the shelves, and it really spooked him out. So it did help a bit. Now, it took Caltrans about a month to fix the Bay Bridge. And when they were ready to open it, they announced that they were going to have a big ribbon cutting ceremony out in the middle of the bridge where the break had happened, which was, if you remember the old eastern part of the Bay Bridge, the break was right at the point where the kind of erector set structure started. The 50-foot section of roadway had collapsed onto the lower deck. And in addition to just having a ceremony, they announced that they were going to allow the public to walk out onto the Bay Bridge for the first time in its history. I knew I had to go. I knew I couldn't miss this. I had to bear witness. Somehow being at the earthquake game epitomized the whole experience for me. And I had to, I wanted my moment of history. I wanted to bear witness again to what was happening. I took my son Razi out of first grade and explained the historical background to him and dragged him along on the bridge walk. We went to Golden Gate Fields where the state had buses, and they bused us to the base of the bridge just past the metering lights and the toll plaza. And we started to trudge uphill. It was a beautiful, beautiful day, sunny and brisk. Caltrans workers in safety vests and hard hats were out by the hundreds to greet people. Thank you for coming. Welcome back. Thank you for coming. We just felt so honored to be there. Up ahead we could see bunting, and we heard bands playing. We knew Tony Bennett was going to sing I Left My Heart. And it was pretty exciting. A radio reporter pulled Razi aside and interviewed him. And he explained that his daddy, that's me, his daddy had told him that the bridge was, where they repaired the bridge, they'd made it stronger than it had been beforehand, which was true. They'd added extra bracing at that part. He said, and his daddy told him that it was important for us to walk on the bridge to show the world that it was safe again. I was so proud of him. Even at 6 years old, he was eminently quotable. So we walked and we walked, and we knew we got to a point where we could see pretty far ahead where the ceremony was going to take place. But he was starting to get spooked out, and I was. You want to? We're not going full Monty. So we decided to turn back. It was cold, and he was getting scared, and I'd had my moment of history. I'd had my experience, my being on the bridge, tied it all together with the earthquake and the aftermath for me, and put the whole experience together, and that was fine. But what we learned from that whole thing was that no matter how you felt about baseball, no matter who you were rooting for, we were all in this together. We were all on the same team. The healing was well underway. Thank you. And I just have to say, the hell with you, Alpha Days. We don't need you.
Hey, pick a G. All right, very good. Well, we've heard stories about assassinations, broken legs, earthquakes, and now we're going to hear from Brandon Spars, who's going to change the subject a little bit. Now, Brandon is a teacher at Sonoma Academy. He teaches humanities and college writing, and he's going to shift this storytelling thing into a story about love in Bali.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. So, when I was 21, I had just turned 21, I was a volunteer English teacher in Bali, Indonesia. So this is almost 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, tourists weren't quite as common in Bali as they are now. There were a few, but they seemed rather unfamiliar to the Balinese. Western tourists seemed large, hairy, loud, and sweaty. And if you know me, I'm pretty large, I'm pretty hairy, I'm very loud. And even here in California, by about 9 a.m., I have a good ring of sweat going. So you can imagine what I was like in 90-degree weather with 100% humidity. I was extraordinary. On a bus, I overheard a woman refer to me as an orangutan. I understood just enough Indonesian to catch that. And then her friend corrected her and said, "He's worse. He looks like a rakshasa," which in Balinese is kind of a combination between ogre and demon. Of course, I was heartbroken, and I was resigning myself to living a rather lonely life and wondered if I would ever become close to any of the Balinese. And then complicating this ogre fell in love. I remember noticing her. She was in my classroom. She was like a flower in a field of grass. Well, she was like the jewel on the pendant of a net. No, she was like the island of Bali itself, prize of the Malay archipelago. I could not control myself. I longed to hear her beautiful voice. Her name was Irmawati. I would call on her incessantly in class. Number 1, Irmawati. Number 2, Made. 3, Wayan. Number 4, Irmawati again. At one point, I arrived at her desk with a flourish to call upon her. And I think it was my enormous size that probably caused her to cower. And then it was the cloud of gas and vapor emitting from my sweaty body that must have enveloped her and caused her to cough and spit in her handkerchief. And I realized I repulsed her. I repulsed the one that I loved. Well, the next day, of course, I was heartbroken, hopelessness, despair, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate. In fact, the hour of my class came and went and I didn't even go. And then, that was a motorcycle. It was one of my students coming to my house. He parked in the garden. His name was Made Begawasi. He had come to see why I had missed class. "What seems to be the problem, Mr. Brandon?" And I said something, "Oh, it's my stomach, it's my head, it's both my head and stomach," and he held up his hand. Apparently, the undue attention I was giving to the lovely Irmawati had not gone unnoticed, and he said, "Mr. Brandon, if you don't mind my saying, I think it is your heart." "Here in Bali," he advised, "we do not wear our hearts on our sleeves." He was very fond of idioms. "Here in Bali," he said, "matters of the heart are of the utmost privacy and discretion. We tell no one." And so I asked, well, how does anyone ever know that they love one another? And that was when I realized he was going to coach me. He was going to coach me in the mysterious ways of the Balinese heart. He was going to help me write a letter to the lovely Irmawati in Indonesian. Oh, it was unlike any letter I would have composed. I would have said, "I can't sleep without you, I can't eat, I can't concentrate." No. His letter was very formal. Why? It was official even. It contained a survey of all of her quiz scores, followed by a summary of her strengths and weaknesses as a student. Why, the only sentence in the entire letter that even smelled of romance was something to the effect of, given my current station in life and the parameters of my duties as a teacher, it would please me to no end for you to call me Blee, which means older brother. Then, of course, he had to finish with a flurry of idioms. The early bird gets the worm, which I understood, and then something about an egg balancing on a rhino's horn, which I did not understand. Before he left, I remember he picked up this can of body powder I had been using. It was my desperate attempt at a pharmacy to try to control my sweating. The main ingredient was sulfur. And in retrospect, I think this was only adding to the demonic effect I was having on the Balinese. Mr. Brandon, we do not use this as a deodorant. This is for elderly people with bed sores. What you need is this. And he pulled a can from his backpack. This, he said, is the magic bullet, which I understood. This, he said, will really rattle her chicken coop, which I didn't. It was a can of Axe, the hottest new fragrance in Indonesia, and he gave it to me. Where do I wear it? I asked. And he said, spray it everywhere, Mr. Brandon, everywhere. The next day in class, I remember a young man tapping his nose. Very nice, he said. And a group of ladies over on the side, haroom, they tittered, as I paced to and fro, casting my new fragrance to the far reaches of the classroom, all the while feigning total indifference to the lovely Irmawati. And then, at an opportune moment, I discreetly slipped her the letter, along with a quiz I was handing back. Whereas my new fragrance was a hit, my letter seemed to be otherwise. The next day she didn't even come to class, nor the following day, nor the third, and on the fourth, that heartache and hopelessness and despair returned. It was I who didn't make it to class. The hour of class came and went, and I didn't go. And then, boom, the motorcycle again. It was Begawasi. What seems to be the problem, Mr. Brandon? And I explained, well, she couldn't possibly like me because she stopped coming to class. Whereupon he held up his hand and said, what, do you think she's some kind of floozy? Do you think just because a man expresses interest that she will commit illicit acts immediately? Do you think she's some kind of canoodler? Where was he getting these words? No. According to Begawasi, this was going exactly how he expected. It was all happening according to plan. And now, he said, it's time to strike while the metal is hot, which I understood. And then he said, it's time to roll back her rock and take a peek at her, the little shrimp she's hiding there, which I didn't understand. But he led me to believe the time was to go pay her a visit at her home with her family. And don't focus on her. No, Mr. Brandon, focus on her parents. The apple does not fall far from the tree, he reasoned. If they liked me, I stood a better chance with her. And then, before he left, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a book. It was Romeo and Juliet. What's that? I asked, and he said, this, Mr. Brandon, is your pretense for being there. When I pushed my bicycle into the garden at that house, It was like I set a bomb off. That family had never seen a white person directly. On television, yes, but not in person, let alone have one show up at their house. The father had been peacefully reading his newspaper under the mango tree. When he saw me, he bolted up and sprinted into the house, presumably to change his clothes. The mother came out, wiping her hands on a dish towel, making culinary calculations, and then disappeared into the back. I heard the clang of pots, and then a hiss as something hit hot oil within seconds and began to fry. Two young kids came out, presumably siblings, and I was led to a front room. Coffee table, chairs. The father arrived with a buttoned shirt. The mother came in with a plate of fried, fishy snacks that she set on the table. And then everyone looked at me expectantly. There was a moment of tense silence. That was when I pulled out Romeo and Juliet. The school was having a play, and we had decided the lovely Irmawati would be the lead role. She was sitting there. They had produced her. She was wearing short shorts, a t-shirt. She had been napping. All of her hair was on one side of her head. I've never seen her look so beautiful. The family cheered, and the father pumped my ham warmly. The mother invited me to try the snacks. And that was when the last member of the family arrived. It was a cat. A skinny thing with a crooked tail. And I remember bending down to pet it, and I don't think it had ever been petted before. Why, it was like electricity when my hand touched its back. It arched its back up into the palm of my hand. I could tell it wanted one of those fried fishy snacks. And I was just about to feed it one when the entire family protested. "Comptoir!" they shouted. "The cat's dirty!" And the mother whipped out this pair of tongs she had in her house dress, grabbed the cat by the neck, and dragged it off like an unwanted branch that had fallen in the garden. The father shook my hand again, invited me to eat the snacks and talk to his daughter, and then stripping off his shirt, he resumed his post out in the garden to enjoy his newspaper. I was alone with Irmawati. I looked at her. "Do you want to do the play?" I asked. She was silent. She was thumbing through the copy of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. "Did you read my letter?" I asked. She remained totally silent. Hopelessness and heartache, always nigh, began to well within me. But then I remembered. I had remarks to deliver to her parents. Begawasi had helped me prepare a speech. I stood up, causing Irmawati to start, and to her surprise, I marched out of the sitting room into the garden, and against the protests of the father, sat down right next to him in the dirt while he was reading his newspaper. I began my remarks. These I had prepared. They were complex, formal Indonesian. It was a survey of all the different countries in the world and percentages of people who spoke Indonesian. I told him that the Romeo and Juliet play would be good for his daughter's English. English would be good for her career. And I was right in the middle of telling him that I would be instrumental in helping her with all of this when I stumbled. The Indonesian was complex and formal. I faltered and ground to a complete halt. And that's when I made a mistake. Every learner of Indonesian will make this mistake. It's a bit like the false cognitive in Spanish, embarazado, which doesn't mean embarrassed. It means pregnant. Well, I was trying to tell the man that I was embarrassed my Indonesian was not good. But what I said to him was, I have an enormous penis. Whereupon the father said no, and I said, oh yes, I have a very large penis. In fact, it has been difficult living in Indonesia with such an enormous penis. Irmawati arrived with the plate of snacks. I scanned her face to see how all of this was going on in her mind, and she remained totally inscrutable. She set the snacks down, spun on her heel, and went back to the sitting room, whereupon I said, perhaps your daughter can help me with my big penis. And he said, no, she cannot. Whereas I had prepared some remarks in advance, what I was not ready for was the effusion of complex formal Indonesian that began to flow out of the father's mouth. I was lost immediately. It didn't seem to be about the play.
back up, and they're going to tell us what they have going on now. Come on up, storytellers.
So next up for me, come on up. I am traveling to Korea to participate in the Federation of Asian Storytellers Conference. I'll be performing a folktale and analyzing how you play characters in a folktale. So I'll be teaching a technique called popping, where you can do a dialogue without saying he said, she said, but making it so you know which character is talking without all of that other language. So that is the first week of September.
Yeah.
I don't have another storytelling gig booked at this moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Involved with this group, helping to put on these events every couple of months and trying to write a sequel to my book, Finding George Washington, a time travel tale. Sequel's about FDR, but I'm working at the blistering pace of about 100 words a month, so don't hold your breath.
I'll be telling a story at Toots's in Crockett on August 11th, and then I'll be at the Grand Slam up in Petaluma in early January.
And we will have our next storytelling, What's Your Story session, September 22nd, here at the Monkey House. What's the theme? Anybody know the theme? Phil? School days. Everybody back to school. And also this Saturday at Stage Bridge at 12 o'clock, there'll be lunchtime storytelling. Barbara Johnson's trying to revive that. She'll have snacks, and everyone can get up and tell a 5 or 10-minute story. This Wednesday at 12 noon. That's on Harrison and 27th in the big church. So come on out. Albertina, do we have any names
We do.
in the hat?
We do.
Okay, so those of you who want to hang around for the 5-minute open mic, please stick with us. And why don't you call the names, Albertina?
Okay, Chuck H.
Chuck?
Yeah, okay.
Come on up, Chuck.
Start.
It's all yours, all 5 minutes.
Oh, boy. The first story had to do with Kennedy's assassination, and just a little bit, we'll try to address my own personal relationship with that. I went to Antioch College, and I went work abroad in my 3rd year. I ended up in Germany, went to a university in Tübingen, which is down in the southwestern part near the Freiburg, and it was going very well in the first semester, and on the 22nd or 23rd?
An assassination?
Yeah. 22nd. That's what I thought, okay. My best buddy and I were at a concert. The Stuttgart Symphony was playing the American, now here, my words fail me, the Dvorak, the New World, right? It was an amazing concert. It was a wonderful house, and the last section of it was basically an elegy. It was finished, and before anybody could put a hand together, the rector of the university came roaring onto the stage and told the conductor to hold it right there. Turned to the audience and said, "We've just learned that John F. Kennedy has been assassinated." And you could hear people breathing. He turned back to the conductor and asked him to play the elegy again. And we were all silent as could be. That finished, and nothing was said from the stage. They took one at a time out of their things, and when the stage was empty, people started leaving, and no one said a word. And the entire group, and the thing was a pretty big house. I think maybe 700 or 800 people, and everybody left and went out, running to their cars or other places to find news. We went out, my buddy and I, and we decided to go downtown to the main square. And in the main square, a candlestick, was assembling, and it was silent. There were no orations. Everyone knew exactly why they were there, and it lasted most of the night. It was the most, well, I mean, for me, it was a demonstration of the unity of everybody. We're all in this together. And I finally went home, and I hadn't thought a whole lot about it until after I heard tonight's thing. So thank you.
All right. Well, it's how one story can trigger another story, and it's all linked up. Any other names in the hat?
JP.
JP, hey! JP is one of our former feature storytellers, and he is a very busy man. So welcome back, JP.
This is for you, Claire. I was short, and I wasn't particularly attractive. I wasn't good at sports. I didn't really have anything going. And in my senior history class, the girl who sat in front of me was like up here. She was the cheerleader. She had a 4.0. She had early acceptance to Harvard. This was '83. That was unheard of. Where we grew up in Northern California, that was like she was going to Mars to go to college. And I never spoke to her, but I had such a crush on her. She had this auburn, curly hair that when the sun hit it, it was like blonde, brown, and red. She smelled really good. And I never said a word to her, and her name was Susan. And she put her head down once in class. And I don't know where it came from, but I sung really quietly to her, "Wake up, little Susie, wake up." And she sat up. And I realized she totally heard me. She didn't turn and look at me. I went home that night and I asked my dad for songs with the word Susie or Susan or Sue in it. And he gave me a few. The next day in class, I said, "Suzanne takes you down to the place by the river. She brings you tea and oranges that come all the way from China." And I saw her lean back. She was listening. Oh my God. The next day, Susie Q, pretty, 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 pretty Susie Q. I didn't know the words, so I just started making them up. But she listened, and I finished with, "Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. And I ended up memorizing all of Fire and Rain, and I would sing her that whole song in class. But still nothing, like no eye contact, but I knew she listened. She would lean back when I did it. I never capitalized on this. I didn't think I had a move. I didn't realize it was a move. But at our 10-year high school reunion, she saw me from across the room, beeline straight for me. And she said, "Why didn't you ask me out in high school?" And before I could answer, this other girl, Maria, came walking over, and she goes, "Oh my God, you sat behind me in English class, and you kept on doing that, Maria, I just met a girl named Maria. Why didn't you ask me out?" And like the two of them looked at each other, and I was like, holy shit, I had a move and I didn't know it, right? So that's my 10-year high school reunion. I'm 28. I'm at a party, and this woman is introduced to me as Lisa, and I went, "Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, Manhattan AG." And she'd never heard Johnny Mathis. She didn't know anybody, like whatever. And it totally worked. And all of a sudden I have a move. And I am like looking up song names, and like, so at any party I'm at, if there's a girl that's I got a song for, I'm making my move, but I always do it from behind and kind of quiet. And I'm gonna say this, it fucking works. Like it works like mad. And I am thinking, I'm a fucking player. You know, like I've got a thing that works, and I don't have anything else going for me, but I can sing. I'm having a party at my house. It's a housewarming party, and I have one roommate, and we both kind of had a disastrous relationship with somebody. Then we moved in together, and we had this great carriage house on 10th and Clement in the city, and he invited some people from his work, and this woman walked in our front door who I was a little attracted to, but I had never met her, and she was introduced to me as Amy. And we had a ping pong table in the garage, and people were having beers and playing ping pong, and I was racking my brain. Oh, I've got one, and it's so old nobody will know it, right? So she's playing ping pong, and I'm behind her, and I go, "Once in love with Amy, always in love with Amy." And she turned and looked at me, put the ping pong paddle down, and left the room. Like, what the fuck? Like, that was not the reaction I got ever, you know? And I went and found her, and she was crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she goes, "That song, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. But my dad just died 3 months ago, and he always sang me that song." And I went, "Oh, you have to marry this girl." And I did. And I sung that song at our wedding.
JP has a playlist. Playlist for a player. Do we have any more open mic participants? Where's Albertina?
I'm right here.
Oh,
I have one.
come on up. And Albertina is one of our producers for What's Your Story?
I'm going to pass this around.
So, as the daughter of Mexican immigrants, sports wasn't a big deal in my house, unless it was boxing. We didn't have a television, but anytime there was a boxing match with Cassius Clay / Muhammad Ali, we'd find a television. And so, I wasn't grown yet, I was still a kid, but watching him box and take his political stances was a big deal at our house. We were rooting for him and rooting for all the things that happened to him when he was sent to prison. And then my father grew up in a town that was up high in the highlands, so there weren't sports facilities to play at. But out of that little town, one of my uncles became a tennis champ, the national doubles tennis champ for Mexico, Vicente Sarasua. And so my father would always tell me that it was in our blood, that we had athletic capabilities. And what he really, really enjoyed was to do fast walking, and you know how they move. But what always really impressed me about my dad was he took up running at the age of 60 for the first time. And then he participated in the Big Sur Marathon. So we went out to see him. Beautiful, beautiful thing. But what I remember most about sports was wanting to play Little League. I loved playing baseball. The guys would play Little League, and after that, the only thing I could participate in at that time, because Title IX hadn't passed yet, was working in the concession stand or taking down the, doing the, what do you call it? Taking score, keeping score. So I'd sit up on a ledge in the outfield behind third base and take score, write it down in a book, change the letters. And then after the games, I'd go down there and play with the guys. I'd love to pitch, love to hit, love the crack of the sound of that bat. But not being able to play made me not a fan of any of the sports that were available. I didn't see football until I was in high school. Didn't see basketball played until high school. You know, in that kind of a setup, you know, people would play on the playground, and we'd play during PE. But the sound of the crack of that bat always just wanted to come out. So 4th grade, 5th grade, playing on the playground with the rest of the girls, and then someone comes up to me and they want to recruit me to play baseball, to play softball, not baseball. Couldn't play baseball, right? Prior to Title IX, to play softball. And I was so excited. I ran home to tell my mom somebody wanted me on their team. No, no, no was the answer. But always, always loved to participate in Girls Recreational Association, and since it was attached to school, well, we could participate. So field hockey came next. I loved playing field hockey, hitting the puck and the sound that the puck made, real reminiscent of hitting the ball, the baseball or the softball. And then I became a teacher, and one of my parents said, "Maestra, how come there's always kids playing on our field, playing soccer, but it's never any of the kids in our neighborhood?" And then I heard my husband say, who's a real big fan of soccer, say, "Oh, I'd love to coach soccer someday." "You would? You really would?" "Yeah, I'd really love to coach soccer." "Well, you know what? At school, one of the parents said, why don't we have a soccer team here from the school and see kids from the neighborhood play? Is it really true that you want to coach soccer?" He goes, "Yeah, I'd love to coach soccer," because he's a heavy-duty soccer player. Still plays right now. In fact, that's what he's doing today. On a Sunday, he always plays soccer. Plays in the Latin League. And so we coached soccer for 19 years. Had a recreational team, and then had a traveling team that did pretty well with the Jack London Youth Soccer League. But it was a great, great experience because the teamwork, my husband did all the technical stuff, and I did all the PR stuff and the working with the parents. Fantastic opportunity to finally build a team with our relationship. So game was on for 19 years.
Great news for a title. Is it 9?